Hello, everyone. Good evening. It is 5 o'clock, and we're going to call the work session to order. I'm going to call upon Superintendent Vela for introductions and to get started on our work session on the strategic plan implementation.
Thank you, President Beno. Excited tonight to come to you with a strategic plan update, just to kind of set up our speakers for today. You'll hear a kind of a past where we are today and where we're going as we look at our strategic plan. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Mr. Spencer Pan.
Good evening, and just thank you again for this opportunity. Joel Beirano, who is our Director of Strategic Initiatives, will be leading this presentation, and then we'll orient the bulk of our time this evening for the questions and deliberations. So with that, we'll launch into this.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, and a pleasure to be with you all this evening. My name is Joelle Beirano. I serve as the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I've had the blessing and privilege to be a thought partner in the implementation now of our strategic plan. Tonight's conversation is intended to bridge from when we last connected in June, which focused on our adoption of the plan, and now as we pivot into the implementation, really focused on the how of the work, what those elements of the framework will include, what opportunities will be brought before the board to hear the wonderful progress and impact of the work that is being done in the 23-24 school year, and how that will set the stage and foundation for the rest of the performance period of our strategic plan through 2028. All right, so to kind of ground us in the conversation here today, really thinking about that bridge from this past June, where we adopted the strategic plan, into where we're headed next. And so the work of the last school year was really focused on that creation. So you may recall we had gone through a variety of opportunities in partnership with internal stakeholders as well as our, with this I wanted to give a huge shout out to our communications team in their work and production of this strategic plan booklet in partnership with some of our local organizations. Implementation of this work. We're again looking at those opportunities to bring forward the strengths of structures, processes, and tools that we utilized in the creation stage with some adaptation, because elements are that we brought forward, what pieces have been adapted, and overall what you can expect with this framework and those opportunities moving forward. The other element to this, which will be very important for us to consider in implementation, we'll have those opportunities to evaluate the fidelity of that implementation, the progress, and ensuring that the impact is what we intend it to be. And then through that continuous improvement month, but then also too at the culmination of the strategic plan, as we would set the stage then for the next performance cycle. Wanted to also ground this team in some of the elements that really drive the process of what we're trying to achieve through this framework and through this process. So this first piece here, being that through action planning will be identification, we address the who, what, when, where, and why, but now the work before us is the how. And so the identification of those strategies and the coordination thereof will be our action planning teams, which we'll talk about here in a moment. We'll be really also be talking a bit tonight about not just the quantitative measures, but the qualitative as well, and how there are summative measures, but also work. We endeavor to increase transparency, communication, and accountability, and that's both inward and externally to our community and to our families. And so by our commitment to transparency in this, we want to be intentional in sharing what the work is. And so we look forward to unpacking those opportunities with this group as well, and looking at how we're going to be sharing the progress and ultimately the impact of that work year to year and culminating at the end in 2028. And with all of these pieces in mind, through the coordination of our strategies, through our commitment to continuous improvement, our investments in expanding transparency, communication, and accountability, we are achieving and living systems coherence. So with that, really the driving force to what we endeavor to achieve through action planning. Now thinking about some of the structures, so how we'll be able to move towards these intended outcomes and actualize those. You may recall some similarities in these structures to what was in place for the creation of this strategic plan. So similarly, and now in our implementation work, a steering team will be guiding this work, and that continues to be our superintendent's cabinet, which is inclusive of cross-functional leadership from across the organization, inclusive of our labor partners. a little bit different now as we're working on implementation. Instead of committees for each goal, we now have action planning teams. And those are focused on each of the priority initiatives for the 23-24 school year. And so when we think about those action planning teams and the membership thereof, we're really thinking about who is impacted by this work. Who is impacted by its output, who may need to contribute to the design and co-creation, co-construction of what this work and those strategies need to be to actualize those outcomes, and that those groups are going to be led by action planning leadership teams. So what we're going to be focused on here today when we think of the action planning team aspect of this is really what you see reflected in those orange circles there. And there is one action planning team for each priority initiative identified for the 23-24 school year. Tonight we'll also talk a bit about what those are, what the outcomes of them are very tangibly, and then kind of look through the lens of these structures in unpacking and building our shared understanding of how we'll achieve those outcomes at the end of the year. Of course, we know very important in this work all throughout is the elevation of voice in understanding how this work is lived day to day, what the impacts of that are. And so it'll be very important for us to continue to stay connected with our larger KSD community, and that community being inclusive of our students, our staff, our families, and our larger community of stakeholders. So a very embedded part of this process will be those opportunities to seek that quantitative and qualitative feedback from them as we continue to engage in that continuous improvement work. All right, so with some of those structures in mind, thinking about our timeline to engage in this work, we'll start to highlight some of the dovetailing processes that really kind of start to illustrate the intersectionality of our strategic plan implementation with some of the other processes that the board will see and experience. So when we think about our action planning timeline overall, and we think of the continuum of time that the school year is, this work actually starts towards the end of the prior school year. So in 22-23, as we adopted the strategic plan, we started immediately thinking about what opportunities there are to really build a strong foundation for this work and really set the stage for where we want to take this in the next 5 years. And so really that opportunity to unpack what those current bodies of work are, aligned to each of our strategic goals and the commitments therein, but also think creatively about where can we continue or expand investments that may be new to really achieve the commitments made in the strategic plan. So the idea that this work really starts at the end of the prior school year. And with those priority initiatives identified, we can then start to think about who needs to be at the table to really co-construct and co-create what these strategies could and should be to actualize that desired state. And our recent focus within that action planning and criteria definition has been the onboarding of our action planning teams. With that, as we get further into the year, we know the charge, the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We now know who needs to be at the table to really co-construct what that plan is. We can then look throughout the year to anticipate those opportunities. That information will be shared with the board in these different cadences. So we have one upcoming, we have one in late winter, and then in the spring. And the ratios that you see there speak to the focus in those data cycles. So when we think of the 80-20, 50-50, and 20-80, that's in reference to the focus on either progress or performance. And the idea there being early on in the year, we haven't lived too much of those strategies quite yet. We need to really see and experience those and gain that input and feedback on how those are going so we can inform then adjustments. So earlier on in the year, our focus will be on progress, the fidelity of the implementation, and as the year goes forward, we will be shifting that focus more predominantly to the impact of that work. While both of those play a key role in each of those spaces, really just illustrates kind of the shifting focus as the year goes on and new and different data becomes available. Following each of those opportunities, there will be presentations with our school board and information shared and published with our wider community about the progress and ultimately the impact of this work. And so you'll see then the timing of board presentations and other opportunities to really surface what those items include, and the opportunities to hear from members around this table as well as the action planning leadership teams in their direction and trajectory of that work. This process does then dovetail into the superintendent's evaluation when we think of, and this is where we're headed next, when we think of the elements that comprise the superintendent's evaluation, one of those elements being organizational performance, that's really the heart of what we're talking about here. And so the idea being that as the year goes on, you're hearing those updates, engaging in additional opportunities, that will become part of the basis for the superintendent's evaluation from a data standpoint. And then culminating here finally will be then that annual report in the October-November timeframe, which this being the first year of implementation, this time is kind of serving that purpose. We're looking back at where we have been, where we're headed with the strategic plan, and at this time in the year moving forward, this will include a summative report of the progress made towards the strategic plan measures. We also recognize and really appreciate the feedback that came out of this group in the recent past as well about how the board can be progress monitoring alongside our action planning teams. And so we're looking at those opportunities to create and share resources with this group to do more of that interim-based progress monitoring in addition to the summative report at the end of the year. All right, so thinking about the superintendent's evaluation. So I mentioned that there are kind of two components to this. So there's the superintendent standards, the standards element that is rubric driven, that the conversation has been led with Larry Nyland around. And this part with the strategic plan and the alignment of the goals to the superintendent's goals really rounds out then this organizational performance aspect of the evaluation process. And so the idea here being that the standards for the superintendent being one component, in addition to the organizational performance of the district, then enables KSD as a whole to drive towards efficiencies, greater embodiment of our values of equity, excellence, and community, and ultimately achieving the results that we've committed to with the strategic plan. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper on the organizational performance aspect of this. So as I mentioned, the organizational performance piece of this is initially driven then by the adoption of the strategic plan, the goals, the commitments, the measures therein. And as we work to translate the 5-year performance period of the strategic plan into year-to-year actionable initiatives, we then see the priority initiatives emerge from that. Kind of this line here between the creation and adoption of the strategic plan, and now we're headed into action planning for this work. As part of the priority initiative, planning and implementation, we know that there will be specific strategies identified, that teams will be progress monitoring the implementation and impact of that work, and that will be done with a variety of qualitative and quantitative data sets. And that this work is continuous. This will be commencing and moving forward throughout the school year. So with that in mind, wanting to also kind of shift to some of the alignment pieces between the standards and the organizational performance as it relates to the evaluative elements. So when we think of these two pieces, and this information is probably very familiar to you, the standards element of this being rubric driven in these 4 areas: instructional leadership, family and community engagement, management and operations, and professional culture. We then see the alignment to the strategic plan goals in those similar areas: preparing students to be global citizens, expanding student, family, and community partnerships, building equitable systems in school environments, and investing in a diverse workforce and inclusive workplace cultures. So as we've heard, the priority initiatives for each year, including the current year, will drive a lot of the work and priority around resource allocations. And so as we think about what those are for 23-24, wanted to kind of ground us in how the priority initiatives are identified and how those come to be. So with the strategic plan, we know that includes the goals, beliefs, commitments, and measures. And as a derivative of that, each year, this planning will commence to then surface the strategies and measures that will enable us to effectively progress monitor year to year. And so kind of zooming into 23-24, the priority initiatives that have been identified were greatly informed by the priority initiatives assessment. So I mentioned earlier that when we had moved past the adoption of the strategic plan, our focus then shifted to what is the body of work within each of these goal areas that's already underway? Alongside of that, what are new and exciting opportunities that our district could invest in to really move us closer to our desired state as it's defined in the strategic plan. And the intersection of those considerations really driving then the priority initiatives for 23-24. So with that, the priority initiative assessment asked a couple questions of our steering team to really surface then what those themes could be, and offered then the basis for some great, the outcomes of this are also shared with our action planning teams, as they'll be using these insights and recommendations for their planning moving forward. So thinking about the 23-24 priority initiatives, we have 3 of those for each of our strategic goals. So again, our first priority initiative, which is focused on the cohesive and holistic multi-year implementation of our multi-tiered systems of support. So this idea around integration of A and B. The outcomes of this priority initiative being inclusive of development of a shared vision, common definitions, guiding principles, and best practices. Our next priority initiative is around being focused on the rollout of curricular resources to support the science for reading and align professional development opportunities, common instructional practices, and routines. Our third priority initiative in Goal 1 is focused on the implementation of STEM and CTE-focused partnerships with the City of Kent. The outcomes being increased opportunities for students to participate in experiential learning. We know that this is not the only work that is core and tied to Goal 1 of preparing students to be global citizens. But again, these are those opportunities that are strategic in nature for our district to make new and unique investments in to push us forward. Priority initiative is focused on developing and curating student leadership opportunities that further empower students to share their ideas and decision making. This has led to some great conversations thinking about the outcomes of resources and toolkits to offer our schools to really center and elevate student voice in that decision making. And some great conversation that's come out of that really centered on not just the procedural tools to make that work exciting and engaging, but also to how we are supporting and empowering our schools to engage in that work really successfully. This next area focused on evaluating the evaluate and implement enhanced tools for unified, the tools that we use to engage in information sharing with all of our stakeholders. So this priority initiative here being a focus on the tools that we use to manage our district and school websites, mobile app, platforms, social media, robocalling, text messaging, so on and so forth. And finally, our last priority initiative in Goal 2 being a focus on the evaluation of implementation of partnerships for student mental health services, the outcome of which being recommendations on sustained investments into mental health services. So thinking about our district's investments in services for mental health, they've been significant as an output of the pandemic and how we're supporting students and families in navigating those changes. So wanting to be intentional about understanding the impact of that work and where our district can continue to make strategic investments in ways that are demonstrated to enhance student outcomes. In Goal 3, we have a priority initiative around refining communication practices and tools that school and district use to communicate with each other. So thinking about the processes and tools that facilitate information sharing between district teams and school teams and vice versa. Our next priority initiative focused on the alignment and coherence of the school improvement planning process with action planning. When we think of our SIPs as our school-based action plans, wanting to ensure that there's alignment and coherence in this framework overall to be inclusive and encompassing of both of those work streams. And finally, publishing a dashboard for strategic plan accountability. So thinking about how we can communicate real time with our public about the progress made and the impact made through our strategic plan measures as those data become available. In Goal 4, we have a commitment here to create affinity-based opportunities to promote BIPOC employee retention. The outcome of this being the launch and expansion of affinity-based mentoring and networking opportunities and allocated resources to sustain those those strategies. Next is developing an updated central office leadership evaluation form aligned to best practice from the AASA. The outcome of this initiative is to produce an updated evaluation form for the identified employee roles using those best practices. And finally, last but certainly not least here, is creating a framework to designate classrooms and schools as inclusive spaces in partnership with the Equity Council. The outcome of which being the creation of a shared vision, common definitions, criteria, and strategies that qualify classrooms for this designation. So with that, wanting to also highlight that this work in many ways is iterative. And so as our action planning teams are coming on board, getting deeper into the work, there may be some slight adjustments in the clarity and terminology used in some of these priority initiatives, really with that intent of increasing clarity around what the purpose of it is or what the outcomes of it are. So with that, our next piece, looking ahead, and thinking about our action planning teams as they get onboarded and underway in their great work. Part of our recent focus has also offered opportunities to generate strategy recommendations in partnership with our steering team. So when we think of the goal areas, the priority initiatives for 23-24, there is also a resource that is shared with our action planning teams to then catalyze the identification of high leverage strategies for each of these areas. And so strategy recommendations therein were derived from input from our KSD leadership team. So when we think of the priority initiatives that we just went through, what strategies, resources, or assets may help the district in achieving those? And what obstacles or barriers could we encounter, and how might we overcome those? So providing an opportunity for our steering team to provide input, feedback, and ideas on those. And again, will be used as a tool for our action planning teams to continue their great planning work. We know that every priority initiative, no two are created equal, and so each one has a little bit of a different scope, a little bit of a different lift, and is in a little bit of a different place with the degree of work already underway versus what may be net new. And so with that, it's been exciting to adapt this framework to meet each team where they are and really catalyze us as a whole towards the success in this year's planning. So to wrap us up here, I wanted to cover a few summary items to take away from today's conversation before we open it up for questions. That KSD will be using the action planning framework to guide its implementation of the strategic plan each year over 5 years. And with that, the priority initiatives will guide our work year to year. And that quantitative and qualitative indicators will be really important for us to look at, not just at the end of this work, but throughout this work as well, and really wanting to be intentional about creating that visibility and those opportunities for our action planning teams, for our school board, and for our larger community. Through that, periodic updates will also be shared with the board and posted on our website about those efforts, and as well, the opportunity for the board to stay informed in connection with Superintendent Vela on those progress pieces, the impact pieces, as well as additional opportunities that may arise to see this work in action. So last but not least here, looking ahead, there are a few pieces to be mindful of. These are the opportunities that we have planned so far to come back to the board to share about that progress and impact, and the opportunities you'll have to hear then from our leadership teams in action planning about their progress. So our first session, tentatively scheduled for early December. Our winter progress update follows in February, and our spring update in May. So as we talked about, as these opportunities commence, that focus will shift from implementation fidelity to impact. Both will be present, but this work is iterative, and as we have greater insight into that data on either end, those will be front and center in our updates to you. And then looking forward to that culminating item in October 2024 of our year-end annual report. With that, thank you for your time and the opportunity to share about this process, and we welcome any questions that you have.
Do my board colleagues have any questions? Director Clark.
So unfortunately, well acquainted with one of my objections in Goal 4. So there's a great deal of discussion and focus on retaining people, which is certainly part of the goal. I'm not disagreeing with that. But, you know, I was teaching in this school district back in the, I know this sounds hard to believe, 1980s and 90s. And one of the problems that the district was facing at that time was the growing diversity among our students, and the need to basically find avenues to help them identify with the whole process of education. And one of those well-established standards was, in fact, a more diverse workforce. All right, so when I look at this, it talks about what we might do to retain people. Recruitment teams around the country seeking to get greater diversity in our staff. Now, there isn't any urban school district in this state that doesn't have the same problem. The supply line within this state that can even begin to handle what it is that we have as that challenge. So I've expressed this to Damon. We are the 5th largest school district in the state, and we're attempting to make a conversion of the students that we're instructing to consider a career in education.
So thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Director Clark. So while it isn't explicitly stated in the plan, we continue from the HR perspective to be visible in classrooms, sharing opportunities with our juniors. That is what is happening.
If I can, then I would like to make a request, and that is a very simple one, to run some form of survey among, A, would you consider a career in education? I would probably hide in that survey also a question, when the third question is, if you are not considering it, what is the barrier?
Are we entertaining, or don't some of the schools right now have a teacher academy and we're focusing on juniors and seniors in the teaching academy and the CTE program? Isn't that correct?
So those are the classrooms that we are speaking in classes that we are presenting.
If I may, though, our 6-period schedule for topic, I mean, I know my daughter, there's so many classes she would love to take, but she just doesn't have time in her schedule, and we only have, and she's in class, because there are probably kids that maybe even just with an idea of this is a way.
I just want to, can I share a celebration too? In addition to what Damon has shared, our Director of Equity and Strategic Engagements, and aligning them or partnering them with students of color who might aspire, because it's really too. And so there is some intentional efforts that I want to celebrate that are in place.
And our Career Fair Extravaganza, put together by Ms. Irene Aguilar, in Kent Lake, I believe, and it was great teaching. So
There is a teaching academy program though, right? Like that, they're focused, I'm assuming, I thought teaching academy program, and they get college and high school credit from Central Washington. Right now they're at a field trip at Central, so I'm just kind of curious. I thought we had something like that, and I thought we were expanding on that.
we'll certainly look into that piece, I believe.
When I was going through superintendent's report to see highlights, we sent anything for high school students. So they go there and from on October 21st. So I would assume granddaughter sets up these animals and she's the teacher. But I mean, if we can provide opportunities where they can just learn to mentor, and this is one camp, and I'm sure there's funding and stuff that has to go into that, but it looks like I just kind of wanted to highlight that. Another thing, I was on a podcast with a bunch of kids, and they were talking about equity and inclusion and stuff in the schools. And one thing that I was surprised with, and I'm guilty of this more than anybody else, I see in our goal 4, we're using the term BIPOC, and the kid color, and they want it spelled out because they feel like it's kind of like, and it was new to me that was kind of an insult to them. So I don't, words matter. I'm not trying to be critical because I've done it too, but, maybe if we kind of think about that, it makes them feel, and I had a question about which one was this? Goal number 3, the building equitable systems of school environments. When you mentioned
Yes, thank you for the question. And just to clarify, are you referring to the refining communication practices or the aligning school, district and school improvement processes?
well, I just made a note on that one, so I don't know which one
No problem. Tap into Dr. Kim for some insights on this, as I know you are involved in both of these. So thank you again for the question. The first priority initiative that touches on the refinement of communication bidirectional for each of those groups, and an opportunity for us to really look critically at the systems that are presently in place, what limitations those may have in our desired state for information sharing, really with that intent of increasing the access and timely nature of information that our schools receive and or our district office teams receive. So before I move on to the school improvement process piece, was there anything that you would like to add to?
If you turn into those sections on the goals, they really highlight some of those commitments, right? And so when you start thinking about some of the commitments that we're really speaking to here, think about how we've defined communication and what that might look like as we're trying to increase efficiency and access. So under communication, we talk about refining systems of district and school communication focused on coherence and clarity. And so as we think about what are the greatest magnitude ways that we can kind of high leverage ways, opportunities that we can invest in to improve those communications, to create coherence in the strategies that we engage both at the district and the school-based level, we're thinking about, what are those things? And one of those then becomes the center of that first goal that we have here in terms of the priority initiative. So, it's our belief that when we talk about communication frequently, oftentimes it's making sure that we have coherence and clarity in terms of what we're working towards. And how do you do that? Is it around understanding the same things? Is it around the information that's being disseminated bidirectionally between schools and in the central office, ensuring that those efforts are the same? And so that's very similar to then the same, I think it feeds similarly into our conversations around like the strategic plan as the district construct overall, right? And then you hear tonight our conversations about how we want to make sure that those elements, as we're speaking to the strategic plan and its implementation, have coherence with the superintendent and his work, right, which is really embodied as the district's work as well as the board's work. And what does that mean then when we think about things like school improvement plans that occur at the school level? They're really one and the same in construct as our execution of strategies that occur at the district level, right? So,
Thank you. And with that, Dr. Kim is the sponsor for that priority initiative and wanted to ensure that you had the opportunity to add any additional context that you may like.
Which one?
For the refinement of communication practices and tools adopted by schools and districts, so KSD Communicator, kind of those pieces.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different platforms. The feedback that we got around that priority initiative, especially from school leaders, is which one should I use? Sometimes we get like platform fatigue, like should I be using SharePoint or should I be using the communicator, email, and as a former principal, the excessive communication that sometimes comes centrally can get in the way of the work that we want our leaders to be able to do in buildings. So building coherence and consistency of the way that we want our schools to have communication. And of course, it's with partnership with my colleague Faith, our Director of Communications. So we're gonna have school leaders be part of this planning team so we can really utilize their voices and their input of what works for you and what are areas that we need to just stop doing.
And when you say school leaders, you mean staff in the school or
Yes, so the recipients of the communication from central office, so principals, assistant principals, our principal supervisors are identifying a couple of key leaders to bring into the planning team. The second part of this goal is around inclusive spaces. And so Simone Hamilton, she is taking the lead around identifying the vision and the definition of what do we mean by an inclusive space for our adults and our students. And we're gonna start kind of with the physical environment first, and then invite key stakeholders, which will include members from the Equity Council, and then others that we think that we want to make sure to be part of the planning and the co-construction of the vision, the definitions, and the look-fors for year one.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on the equity committee, and we've been.
I thought so, yeah.
We've been kind of talking about that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that, I also wanted to touch on the school improvement plan, if that was an area of interest as well.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So with that, the other priority initiative that you mentioned in Goal 3 is this second one here that focuses on the alignment of district and school improvement processes to promote strategic plan implementation fidelity and coherence. And thinking about the explicit commitment made in the strategic plan, this is around improvement. So adopt and use continuous improvement cycles to ensure a successful strategic plan implementation. So when we think of the school improvement plans as our school-based action plans, as it were, and then these priority initiatives being district action plans, the intention for alignment and coherence becomes a bit clearer. And so with that, the priority initiative thus far in planning has focused on really defining what that coherence in process looks like and feels like, and what resources may be necessary to achieve that.
Thank you. I have some other questions, but I don't want to control the whole thing, so I'll let.
Director Margell, do you have any follow-up questions?
I did have one question, and I'm trying to look at the information specific on the OSBI under measures, and I do see that if it's not inclusive, and you can't put everything on one page. But we did just specifically pull out 3 of the 7 federal OSBI categories under the different measures that we're looking for a 5%. I assume that we are looking for a growth of 5% in the total category, or are we looking for it specifically in just those 3? Sorry, it goes on and on. I think I'm just holding it. Yes. Just those 3 race categories. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So the inclusion of these specific categories are intended to highlight where our district really has an opportunity to enhance supports. So when we think of the overall proficiency of our students, it is a goal for us to increase that proficiency for all of our students. These are specific areas of growth for our district that we are wanting to be increasingly intentional in resourcing to close those gaps. With that being said, I also want to offer an opportunity for any further insight into the trajectory of work commensurate to those measures. I know we've been very focused on some of the, as it pertains to ELA, with one of our priority initiatives, the implementation of the core resource of CKLA. So with that, I think in summary, it's important for us to increase proficiency rates for all of our students. When we looked at the data for proficiency, these were the areas that needed the most growth and supports from our district there. So those were called out intentionally, but not to imply any lack of focus on all of our students as a whole.
Okay, good. So I would, of course, want to assume, like, if we saw degradation in one group, but
Right.
that wouldn't be acceptable either, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when we think of, to build on that, thank you, I see there being, absolutely the intent in our reporting. So when we think of our dashboards or other data tools that are going to be published that highlight the progress and performance, really the intentionality of all of our student groups. So the opportunities that'll come through that reporting to see not just the data relative to these measures explicitly, but also the additional quantitative, a student and a story behind each of these numbers. And so we really want to be intentional in highlighting that.
And if I may add, I think there's a progress right now is as they're diving deeper into these conversations, they're recognizing and eliciting exactly those conversations around what are other qualitative or quantitative strategic plan. And so those would be things that we would have updates on throughout the course of the
Action planning team specifically. I know that we had intentional kind of a cross-section of different stakeholders within the district. And I heard you talk about this, and just, could you talk a little bit about the people that are going to be involved with that? Is there going to be an intentionality to getting the work done within the district? I just wanted to get a little bit more information on that.
Yes, thank you for the question to the action planning teams. The membership of those varies, certainly, and the work of our onboarding process has highlighted be really important in that no two initiatives are created equal in that sense. So it's been an intentional focus in the onboarding for each of those teams to really unpack that. And for individuals, do we need to pull deeper into this work to really co-construct the direction of this alongside of us? So, like many good things, it depends on elevate voice of a variety of stakeholders, but that all of that is an expectation and structure of the process.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
So to answer your question about metrics, and then a powerful example that I can share is there's an elementary school principal who wants to focus in on identifying students' differentiation. And one of the things that this principal is going to do is to collect street data for you. What makes it engaging and what doesn't make it engaging? And so while it might not directly be part of the steering team.
Thank you. That's really the heart of what I was trying to get at is I think everything we're doing, we use student voice in some way, you know, whether through a principal or however that's where it's fairly obvious.
Yeah, and there's a middle school that we're working with at discipline disproportionality. Why are we seeing a disproportionate number of students who identify as Black, so much truancy? What is it that is causing you to not want to go to class? So
My last, it's not really a question, but I said this last time and I will bring it up again, alignment, and I still think it's something that should be looked at the district level, and making sure that we can have data 5-year rolling.
we have a board memo that Spencer's team, and also addressing the now what. That is in draft form, and we're trying to address along the way as it relates to our priority initiatives, but then also just the achievement data that becomes available.
That component of feedback. So that is one of the ongoing conversations we're having as relates to the facing nature of the strategic plan metrics. With 20, 50, 50, 20, 80, I think those will be opportunities as well to bring the data that may be informative of some of these particular reporting that one time per year for the state benefit. But we also track a lot of data that helps our team be utilizing as part of any sort of work that draws upon. We also want to make sure that that information is available, accessible for, and their timeline for it. And we recognize that those are not exhaustively the only metrics.
Is that on those committees that, like, how many in certain high schools?
And that's what we're talking about, because the metric we're utilizing on that practical, ways for elementary-based purposes, like but we look at the metrics that underlie that. Are students making progress towards credits? Are other metrics? And I think that's the important highlight that Dr. Kim was pointing out is we've had those and we've looked at those. What we're starting to have more explicit conversations about is beyond that is also really critical, and we want to be looking at those. And they don't always show up when we have a kind of dashboard metric that says, here's your once and.
But, when you see how many are tardy or discipline or whatever, that is a fact. But the underlying, there was a problem before that created them to turn to those. And I think sometimes we miss that underlying. To get to the real answers, we have to get beyond. And then we have to somehow or other.
I appreciate.
Still with an eye on, we have to move graduation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Like, it is, and so I just don't want to lose sight of that, and I just think that those numbers are still very important.
And to Director Margel's point, we need to make it an expectation as part of this action planning framework that we are centering and are truly in service to overcoming whatever those elements may be. And the idea that we can't wait until the end to know if our board, our internal teams, as well as our community with those interim indicators as well that help us understand.
6 o'clock, we're going to adjourn, and we're going to adjourn to an executive session for approximately 30 minutes. Yeah. Good, whatever.
Give you a count.
Okay. Oh, now.
It is really, I forgot my.
Good evening. It is 6:33, and I'm going to call our regular meeting to order. We're going to start with roll call, and at this time, the board will take a roll call for attendance. I'll call each board member's name, and if they are present, they'll say present here or something to that extent. We'll start, well, supposedly Director Farah's on Zoom.
He hasn't dialed in yet.
Okay. Director Clark,
Present.
Director Hamada,
Present.
Vice President Margell,
Here.
and somehow I am present somehow. But I'm going to call Director Clark to say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We welcome the public's participation in this board meeting and thank those of you who have come to this meeting and those who are viewing from the live stream. The process for audience participation. The purpose of board meetings is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meetings, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors, not because we don't care. We just need to gather more information or chat with you at a later time. But we do care. We want to hear from you, though. Individuals with items for the board or superintendent must provide the items directly to safety services staff. Approaching the dais during the board meeting is not allowed. Any items turned in will be provided to the board and superintendent following the meeting. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and turn it in either before the meeting begins or no later than the beginning of the legislative update, which will be happening later in the agenda. And once that happens, no cards will be accepted once this report has begun. Visitors who have completed a comment card, which I have a few, which is awesome, indicating a desire to speak to be on the agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda. There's a brief delay in the live stream audio. We will allow for extra time for you to make your way to the boardroom if you are in an overflow room, which we may have today. When it's your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Public comments will be heard after the opening, during preliminary communication from the audience, at specific agenda items, and during final communication from the audience. Students will always be the first to speak on any topic. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You'll hear a timer when your 3 minutes are up. Please do not use specific names of staff or students or personal identifiable information when making your comments. Comments concerning the performance of a public employee or official may be heard in executive session as authorized under the Open Public Meetings Act, RCW 42.30.1101F. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff or board members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it's too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant, and I promise I'll be really nice when I do it. And per board procedure, written material to provide board members with background information should be submitted to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. That is a lot. I will pause because we will now go to 1.06 and Vice President Margell will read the land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, who historically lived throughout the area between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound.
Thank you very much, Vice President Margell. We will now do our agenda review.
There is a recommended modification to item 7.01. That is resolution number 1659, certification of excess property tax levies for calendar year 2024. The modifications replace the original language to reflect 2023-24 dual and heritage language program grant application. The modifications correct the narrative and attachment to align with the
Illustrated by the superintendent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The motion is,
The modification of 8.02, it was just the wrong attachment got attached, and we're just correcting the attachment that
No? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll call, so the motion passes. Excellent. We are now, I will delay a little bit, 2.01 Proclamation American Education Week.
Week. Whereas public education is the backbone of our democracy. Students with both academic and social growth, schools give them hope for and equitable access to education faculty and staff, custodians, administrators, bus drivers, clerical, librarians, education support neighborhoods and communities, bringing together parents and children. Educators of the Kent School District proclaim the week of November observance. Signed this 8th day of November 20.
For National Native.
Washington State, since time immemorial, reserve rights and other tribal communities also reside in the political, environmental, and whereas state law, RCW, with tribes, in order to enhance state law, RCW 20 government in common schools, which will contribute, and whereas substitute mascots, harmful stereotyping has designated the Friday immediately Heritage Day, and where heritage of this continent's first people, Governor of the State of Washington, Ensley, October
Week.
Whereas one of the practices that will help advance student achievement socially, and whereas data assessment colleges help students develop their individual abilities to be and assessing the results to determine if the goals were achieved at each school to help, and renewal and emphasizes the work of school psychology. 23 is National School Psychology, and I request a point of personal privilege.
You are requested.
I am well acquainted with the particular challenges that brings in terms of driving her to work at 9 o'clock at night, to meet with the family in an apartment, and just a moment to look at why the federal government actually sends money to special education. The idea that education is fundamental to success in a democracy. Therefore, particular barriers and handicaps to overcome. But when you're going to access federal money, that has to have the title must in fact be nationally certified. So I suggest to you that they are a critical agent in
Mr. Clark, it is now time for 3.0 preliminary communication from the audience. I am told that there's no online comments first, and I'm going to call upon, looks like Riley Kenner to come up to the microphone. And you have 3 minutes for your comment.
For students who only require the course for high school credits, that's all.
Thank you so much. Now, we don't usually, all right, now we have one more comment, and this one is from Christy Padilla.
President Markle, Superintendent Vela, Board of Directors. Tonight, I come to you as a last resort to ask for help. I have brought to the attention this issue to district admin since August 29th. Federal law states that students receiving special education receive their education in the least restrictive environment. This includes elementary that self-contained K-3 students receive their specialist services all at once in a general education kindergarten. Students the opportunity to participate with age-appropriate non-disabled peers. This is required by law, and I have not been able to get a reasonable solution to this issue. The response that our KEA building reps were given by building admin is that KEA does not create are provided opportunities to receive services with age-appropriate, non-disabled peers. Thank you.
To go to the superintendent's report, and I will call on Superintendent Vela to give the superintendent report.
Thank you, President Benno. Tonight I begin my report with a heavy heart for students, families, staff, and community members who may be affected by the violence in Gaza and Israel. Our district is comprised of many diverse cultures and people representing many races, ethnicities, and backgrounds, including our students, staff, and families who have ties to Israel and Gaza. We remain committed to providing safe, and welcoming environments for all of our students. It is okay that we may hold different opinions, but the conflict and complex history of Israel and Palestine, but anti-Semitic or Islamophobic speech or acts are not tolerated in our district. There is a list of resources that may be useful to our families as they talk about these events. Please find these resources posted on each school's homepage in the news section. Please know that we are united as a community to support and care for each other during these difficult circumstances, to discuss community concerns regarding the conflict between Gaza and Israel. We value our community organizations that provide support to our families, the long-term and trusted relationships that we have built together. It is by partnering together that we will be able to create successful outcomes for all of our students. This evening, I want to thank everyone who voted in this election. At this time, we are monitoring the election results and will post updates on our website as they become available. In the event the levies do not pass, together with our school board, we will look at all options and evaluate our next steps. Again, thank you to those who supported these levies because we truly view you, our community, as our partners in working together to support our students. As read in the proclamation, I also want to highlight Native American Heritage Month and commend Mr. Richard Summers, our Native American Education Liaison, for his work with our Native American students. I hear there is an upcoming field trip for Lake Young students, and I look forward to seeing the photos of that visit. Recently, I met with Representative Berquist to discuss our enrollment trends, transition kindergarten, the budget issues facing many school districts in our state, among other things. We will continue to collaborate on these topics moving forward. I am so proud of the beautiful diversity in our district, and I'm passionate about language access for all students and families. To that end, I partnered with Representative Orwell to pass the Language Access Bill. To further this goal, I am proud to share that we are moving to a new language service provider that works better with our current Teams platform and is a cost savings measure that offers both the same and additional services and benefits to our families. Our communications team has scheduled trainings for our staff to begin using the new service with the goal of completing the implementation, hopefully by the end of this month. This past week, our central office staff was invited to learn more about Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, during their lunch hour. A special thank you to Ninfa Pozos, KSD Spanish translator and interpreter, and Ms. Simone Hamilton, Director of Equity and Strategic Engagement week. There are a few student athletic recognitions I would like to point out, and I'm going to start with our Kent Lake and Kent Ridge girls high school soccer teams advancing to the state tournament this year. We wish them well in the tournament taking place this week. I also want to congratulate Harper Harrelson Margell, who placed third in the 100-meter breaststroke at the West Central District 3 Swimming and Diving Championships. She was the only KSD athlete to place in the top 3. Congratulations to all 4 high school cross-country teams who competed at the West Side Classic Cross Country Championships and for advancing 2 members from each team to the state meet. This week, I also attended the college and career extravaganzas at Kent Lake and Kentwood High Schools. It was inspiring to see students interested in finding out more information about their options after high school. This is a great reminder of how community partnerships with both local colleges and universities and businesses in our area come together in support of our students. I'm looking forward to next week when I will be presenting with Dr. Larry Nyland at our upcoming WASDA conference. We've been asked to share our work and process for our superintendent board governance work in support of student learning. Since this is our only board meeting in November due to the Thanksgiving break, I want to say that I am sincerely thankful for our school board members, our amazing staff, and our incredible students, families, and community partners. I am humbled and inspired every day to continue doing this great work to prepare students for their futures. Please take time to express gratitude to those around you during this season of Thanksgiving. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Vela, for your report. We are now at 5.0 legislative update, but before we do that, I have to announce that any remaining comment cards for people who want to speak to us at the end of this meeting need to be turned into the blue, I never know where it is, drop box somewhere at the back of the room. I'm gonna wait for a second in case anybody needs to dash that direction. I don't see anyone in here running. Students don't want to ask us any questions. Okay, fine, that's good. So then I have to now, close the public comments for the evening, and I'm now going to call on Director. What is wrong with me today? I'm going to call on Director.
You know, this is an interesting evening. The WASDA, Washington Association of School Directors, as I've mentioned, be committee that puts that together. And last time I talked a little bit about that, but they've come up with their 4 priorities that they're going out statewide for the legislative year coming up. And they are to provide on student need, to close opportunity and achievement gaps, advance supports for career and technical education, maintain the transition to kindergarten program, close regionalization factor gaps between adjacent districts in line with the recommendations from the 2022 K-12 Basic Education Compensation Advisory Committee, and eliminate the differential special education. Last year, we really pushed on that in a full session. We made small amounts of headway on that in WASDA. Build safe and healthy schools. Safeguard the social, emotional, and physical safety of students and staff by updating the school construction formula, which really needs it, supporting a simple majority vote for school boards, expending resources for relevant and essential staff training, and engaging students and parents in decision-making. And the 4th priority is going to be transport and feed students. We're very close in the state to having 100% of our kids fed. And we do a really good job in this district of it, but they're trying to put that over the top. So we don't have to worry about that anymore because it's just common sense. Kids are gonna learn better if they have something in their stomach and some energy to deal with, and they don't want to have to be ashamed that they can't afford food or have to have a special card or whatever, that they can just go up there and get lunch and everybody's the same. So we're working close toward that, and our part that we fall under too. They had their meeting in Yakima, Washington, and they discussed a whole bunch of things. Something you might want to make note of here, that if you're interested in what the State Board of Education is doing right now, upcoming rules hearing on performance requirement rules for the performance-based graduation pathway option on Tuesday, November 14th at 3:30. You can attend and testify in person if you have some feelings about that, or you can testify online. But if you're interested in those pathways to graduation and changing them, the State Board of Education wants to hear from you, and from your thoughts and their thoughts and other professionals, they'll develop a policy on that. So if you want to be part of your education and what goes on with it and goes on in your classrooms and your students, the students can also testify. That's something to look forward to, going and attending. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Director Hamada. We're now going to move on to 6.0, and we're going to look at a fiscal year 2023 year-end financial report. And I'm going to call on Superintendent Vela for introductions on this.
Thank you, President Bennett. I'd like to invite Mr. Ben Eric, our Associate Superintendent of Finance, to begin our presentation. Mr. Eric.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Vela. It's my pleasure to present on the year-end financial report for fiscal year 23. So just a reminder that this is like a retrospect to OSPI on October 25th, but it does not incorporate the results of the levy that is currently failing, or this is purely retrospective in terms of financial activity of last year. Could you click to somebody, there we go, thank you. So we'll do 4 things. Break down some of the financial activity of last year, update on some financial trends, recap the role of the levy, and then look at some next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first 2 slides are provided more for public disclosure. I'm just going to highlight a couple key things. The fund balance is down by about $3 million. We've been able to keep it more or less flat as a function of the availability of ESSER funding. This year that we're in now is the final year that we'll be able to claim ESSER funding. Next slide, please. And this is our statement of revenues and expenditures. Just to note as sort of a key fact to keep in mind that we all told across all funds spent $573 million. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are providing a little bit more of the financial profile of the district. This one talks a little bit about where our money comes from in the Kent School District. So your orange at 71.6% is the state portion. So we have always been and continue to be majority state-funded school district. The gray and blue pieces of the pie are respectively the federal portion and the local levy portion, okay? Right now we're at 16% local funded, but what's gonna happen, you'll see in the next few years, is that as ESSER vanishes, necessarily the size of the blue will get larger, right? And the size of the orange will get larger as a percent. So right now we're at 16%. We could be north of 20% when we no longer have COVID aid to claim from. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a depiction of the nature of the expenses. We spent $495 million in the general fund. And one of the things we keep an eye on is what percentage of the total expenditure is attributable to salary and total compensation. And for last year, it was 82.4%. You see the 2 largest cost centers from an object standpoint are certificated salaries and employee benefits. Next slide, please. This is a report on our sort of budget to actual. So we budgeted, how did financial activity relate to what we projected? And so on the left, you see that we collected 99.2% of the revenue that we anticipated receiving, and we spent 97.3% of the expenditures that we budgeted for. So those are pretty typical across time, and not surprising. Next slide, please. This is our status update on ESSER. So we are currently in the final year of ESSER claims. This reports on the end of last year. So this reflects that as of year-end close, we had about $31 million remaining to claim in this year. Recall we've been claiming about $30 million each year. We anticipate actually that we'll probably finish off that claim well before the end of this school year. So sometime around the middle of the school year, we think we'll be done with ESSER. And then again, this will be the last year that we have that funding available. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into some financial trends and some staffing graphs over time, as well as some enrollment. Next slide. This is the depiction. Take a minute with this. I realize there's a lot of data on the page here, but you've seen this graph before, and it's an important graph in that it shows the history of the student enrollment in the Kent School District, and then it color codes the type of enrollment, okay? So your blue bar is your general basic ed enrollment. Your red bar is students enrolled in ALE programs like Kent Virtual Academy would be an example. Your green bar is students that are enrolled in Running Start programs. And finally, you can see 2 things. First of all, that we experienced an enrollment decline starting in 18-19. So our enrollment decline actually started before COVID. Then it accelerated immediately after COVID, okay? Stayed down. Once we returned to bricks and mortar instruction, in-person instruction, we had a small different, right? Because we're essentially forwarding that money to the community college. For all intents and purposes, they are enrollees of the community college. But our actual blue bar continues to be among the, because it is enrollment that drives our primary revenue source. You'll recall the slide earlier showing the parts of the pie and which source of revenue is the greatest source of revenue. It's the state, right? And the state revenue is derived by what? Enrollment, right? So as that enrollment declines, so too does our revenue. Enrollment, so you see September, October, and we were able to get November in there. And the blue bar reflects where we were month by month last year, and the orange bar reflects where we are this year. So we are down every month to last year. We actually started to develop a bit of a gap now, and we're further down now than we were at the beginning of the school year. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to go through some graphing slides that are also historical in nature. I've ever had. Now I'm going to show you some staffing slides showing that we are among the highest levels of staffing that we've had. So the first graph shows total staffing FTE, okay? And this is going back total. And then the next slide pulls out just certificated staff. And it's a similar shape to the previous slide. At year end, 1,858.2. Next slide, please. Okay. Delivered this presentation to you every year that I've been in the district. And for the last thing in the sense that it helped school districts across the state through the COVID pandemic. But now is materializing much later. So I have tried in each one of these presentations. In the blue graph, you see the total amount that we are a dark orange bar, which represents all of our, and then at the top you see sort of a shaded orange, and that represents the amount of a gap of $31.5 million between our nation. Okay, so so we're growing in the current school year. So one of the things we keep an eye on is payrolls, total payroll, okay, an apples to apples comparison. So this is getting to the point that we have a deficit as when we prepared this presentation, like neither the EP&O or the capital tech levy are likely to pass. Money that is associated with each of those measures for each calendar year going forward. The $29.2 million on the capital side, okay? The real impacts start in calendar year 25. We successfully pass an EP&O on a second effort, we would be looking at a lost revenue of $79 million. Gives you a sense of the magnitude. Another update today, and it inched a little bit ahead, but we're still at least a couple percentage points south of 50. I truly hope that I'm wrong. Any questions about that?
Can you go back?
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's that $29 million.
That is correct.
We can't get that back.
That is correct.
So by that not passing, we lose $29 million of
Correct.
budget. For next school, it would have been next don't pass. Then for calendar year 25, we miss out on $140 million. And calendar year 26, we miss out on 140.
29.2 is a sunk situation at this point. If there's no redos on the 29.2 million, right? That's between now and the beginning of calendar year 2025. There are some rumors in the community that we have more than that. That is incorrect. We have one more opportunity. There are different slots to choose from, but we have one opportunity to go to the voters.
I think there's a perception that we can run it in February, run it in.
Of them. We get one chance. We have the option of when to do it, okay? And there was some question about this, and we vetted it with several lawyers, and we're certain of the answer. So it is not a question of how many times we get to run it before calendar year 2025. Then what you see listed under calendar year 2025 is, at that point, uncollectible for that calendar year. We would not get to go out for a third opportunity, okay? Any other questions? I appreciate the clarifying question on that.
I just want to make sure I'm looking at these numbers correctly. Going back to, the pie chart.
Yep.
Okay.
Which slide is that? Fund side, yep.
Yep. So so certified salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits. Could you give me a purchase service expense?
Contracts, our running start flow through is a purchase service, for example. But any contract we have with an organization is a purchase service.
Tech?
Sure, we have a service provider that's helping us with special education services, for example, that is a contract, you know, if we have health services.
Do like
Yes.
our Hazel Health and all that.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then travel and I'm guessing capital outlays in there too. If we added
Yes.
all of those, 17.6%.
Yeah, what was
About
the,
87.17 million.
adding which? I'm sorry, the ones you called?
Everything other than salaries, and
Yes,
benefits.
okay.
So, and then go forward with this 87.17 million in mind with its everything other than salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go forward, please? Okay. That's what I'm looking at. Like, those are the big buckets, right?
Magnitude of what we're facing with a loss to EP&O is, first of all, extremely rare in the state to the staffing and cost structure of a school district. Not just marginally material, it's extremely material. So
What would be the material that we lose? I guess that's my direct question.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
put it this way. I'll put it this way. I'm going to make a sweeping generalization here, and there might be an employee in the Kent School District. Their compensation package in one way, shape, or form is subsidized by the local levy. They may not realize it, but run the state program of basic education. That impacts both the program that you can offer, the class sizes that you can offer, the support services you can offer. It impacts both sides of things. There are a couple rare exceptions to that, but as a general organizing thought, it is correct.
Eric, that the state model that they're putting out for budgeting is not meeting the needs of our everyday school districts. Unfortunately, to districts that have to start to sacrifice where they're going to, especially in diverse communities, that it plays into how they can deliver their.
Is that it's quite rare as to what happens to school districts when they fail an M&O twice. So we don't really have to wonder about it. The most famous case is the Seattle City failure in the state. I believe the Battleground School District went through at one point in the early 2000s. Marysville.
Yeah, I think it was Marysville. You're correct.
But to these districts, it's not a subtle thing. And it's difficult to.
Bonds fail in districts, property values go down, apartments, temporary housing, and everybody's net worth is affected by what happens.
Questions.
Okay.
So, final slide.
Oh.
Okay, the 30 million a year of claim on ESSER, we're fine from a fund balance perspective right now. We these briefings over the years about the coming ESSER cliff. This now, to be clear, the end of that money. And so the graph that I gave you was intended to quantify, gets bigger in the year that we're in. We had some decent size that will add to that gap. And there is a provision in the superintendent's contract where it says that he will be evaluated in part on his informing the board. Any additional questions about that, you could either ask them now or afterwards.
Monitor the monthly payroll. Can we go to that slide?
Yep.
I'm just has been coming,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I'm curious, and you probably don't know off the top of your head, like what services or whatever ESSER we're paying to increase payroll if we knew a fiscal cliff was coming. So I'm very concerned about this 11.74% slide.
Like what are the largest increases of our expenditures
Well,
in
the
the
staffing.
schools? Right.
So that-
So much of the largest increases that we're experiencing are due to two things, okay? One is we're implementing the contract with Fidelity. So if we have so I'm trying to get you a feeling for the fact these are not sort of discretionary onesie-twosie decisions that are being made, okay? So, and this is part of why September might actually be a little higher than what we see in October. You had two big contracts this year. That you,
And the paraeducators?
right?
KPA and the, but you
There was
can't tell me
another
that the paraeducators and KPA raised salaries 11.74%, or is this what this is telling me?
So you had some retroactive that hits in September because those, I think they settled in September. right? So I don't up in a September. So you'll kind of have a doubling up in September, when you won't necessarily see in October. But what you're seeing essentially here is that
Did we add any new positions? Or like, I find it really hard to believe that that's just two contracts being implemented.
it's not the only, that's not the only factor.
got it.
Added staff.
Yeah.
There were instances where added staff, we opened a new school, right?
See, yes.
We added counselors.
Yeah.
You know, our teaching numbers are at their highest level right now. We've had growth in our MLE.
Do my colleagues have any other questions about this budget presentation?
I'm just going to throw out some illustrations. I was in the Edmonds School District, and I think it was 1976, and they double failed a levy. But I have never forgotten the day the counselor came into my classroom the next year and asked me to take on the 44th kid in that. And the Highline School District went through a double levy failure, and I think it was 77, but in that range. And both districts agreed, in summary, it takes 10 years to recover from that.
Questions for my, sorry, I said questions for my colleagues? Seeing none,
I'm good.
we can move forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Getting his finances in order. Thank you, and also the hard work that he's done on other issues. Thank you very much, Director Eric. It's a greatly appreciated.
All right, let's move forward in our agenda to 7.0, discussion and approval. And we are going to go to 7.01, resolution number 1659, certification of the excess property tax levies for
Superintendent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions? Resolution 1659, certification of excess property tax levies for calendar year 2024 as amended. If you're in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. None. No abstention. Motion carries. Let's continue. We're going to go to 8.0, consent. I want to pull 8.13,
815.
815. Any other items? Seeing, 813 and 815.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We adopt the consent agenda 8.1 through 8.16 minus 8.13 and 8.15. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. None, and no abstention. Motion carries. I guess I pulled it so I can move, but I don't think I can move. Okay.
I'll move 8.3, a remodel of district office and a 200 conference room. I need my glasses.
I think she intended to say 8.13.
Yes, excuse me.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Again, it's like procedural. So this is on the agenda now. But when I walked into the room last month, the construction and stuff already started. So I guess I'm kind of curious about kind of like the process and why this is here now.
Absolutely. No, great question. I'd like to invite Dr. Behringer to the podium to answer your question.
Thank you, President Beno, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry. Couple things. First of all, just to kind of administrative campus here for teams and groups to have meetings. We've taken several different conference spaces away over the last few years, and so there is a need to provide some additional space. This is one of several spaces on campus that we started to retrofit and move things out of to be able to bring back conference spaces for teams and work to be able to be done up here on district campus. This particular project, last year was here at central office to be able to have access to the conference room that is currently in that space. to be able to access. And talking to various team members, we've realized that we didn't have enough spaces at all. And so we started looking at where we could create those spaces. This was one of, again, like I said, several spaces. To answer your question is, we are obligated to bring to the board, this particular part of the project was gonna be less than $25,000. So we didn't need to bring it to the board. Fortunately, once we started the project and we got into things that we didn't realize that were going to be in those spaces, we realized that we were going to be over the $25,000 and we needed to come to the board. And so that's why you see this on the board agenda this evening, is because it did go over.
Plans, I don't see descriptions. Like I see below, like whoever is doing the construction needs to have like insurance or whatever, but there's no plans really. I don't even see a description. I think the only description I see is
there is a description
model
in there.
Superintendent wing.
No, there's a description in there of all the things that are being done. It's in a paragraph. I believe it's on like the 3rd page.
Yeah.
If there are specific questions, I've got Executive Director Dave Buzzard here who can answer specific questions, but that's the scope of work.
Dr. Behringer, just for my clarification, you said it was roughly around 24,000.
To bring to the board.
Okay.
And so initially we thought we were going to be right up to that 25,000. No, 37.2 is the total, inclusive of the 25. So it's an additional 12.2 on top of
Okay, that.
Related to this or no?
Yeah, there are plans.
Okay. So what if we vote no on this tonight? What happens? So like if it's already started, if we say no, what happens? Like it's just gonna be hanging out there in dust and studs? Is that what's gonna happen?
Well, I believe a little update. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say no, and we could just leave it sitting there, stop the work, pay them for what.
Started this, and now we're getting your approval. So I feel like it's just like, well, if we don't approve it, we're jerks. But then here's this extra expense that we were just looked at our abysmal. Ultimately, like we're responsible for the budget, and now it's like here's this extra expense that.
See if I can help a little bit with that. We've, just as a comparison, things we encounter behind walls once we get to asbestos, those types, so those change. But another way to answer your question is we do $25,000 because sometimes these jobs, when you start to open walls up, that's what you see. So the change, this board in terms of the work that we need to do has needed space and another larger meeting space here in our district. And that's the biggest use of the meetings. One other piece, we did this in, I believe.
Files.
Right, and so we lost that space, just as an example. Similarly, we did the same kind. Or now we need to do other things with the current space we have with the.
Was that taken into consideration of you?
Is you just to move a portable is the $75,000 to $95,000. Okay.
My colleagues, other questions?
I brought this up in our 2. Cost overruns are expected. If we thought that day, because it seems silly to leave space that is unused, but I just hope that this is for doing what happens in the cost overruns, and I think anybody prudent. Yep.
Thank you.
I just have it's not needed with cost overrun. In government contracts, like Director Margell was sure I had that set aside, but when they actually come in and keep coming back to the well, it doesn't look too great. We want to kind of contingency fund or something built in. I don't know. Maybe government contracts, smaller amount, we don't.
A smaller amount, yeah, in this
So,
case.
okay.
Of adopting 8.13 remodel, but I mean, you've heard what the board had to say, so I'm hoping you take that into.
0.15 gifts, donations, and memorial acceptance.
I second.
Glen Ridge Elementary, their Matson Middle School, their PTA raised $600 to support his TV with flat screen display case for Kent Lake. Appreciate the efforts of these people.
Thank you, Director Clark. Any further comments? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no. There's none. No abstentions. Do anything with that? That's here for our information. Unless the board would like final communication for the audience, which takes us to 10.02, board director.
To watch some football games. during the season. And I just want to compliment school football coach. I'm well acquainted with the fact in a competitive league, it is a numbers game. It takes 100. Program was bereft of their head coach from last year, so it was a new staff. That I'm making is KM was put in a particularly difficult situation. Their feeder school was in fact, the result was that cutback in activity buses dramatically reduced the number of kids in which was facing when he took the field. But they did an absolutely amazing job with what they had, and I hats off to them.
You know, got put out there when they, with the end, but they had some good games that they won. Yeah, so I'll be transportation as much as we can, but again, it costs dollars to do that. I'm going to start off with kind of down at Mill Creek passed away, and that was very nice. I've gone to a couple of them this year, employees and even a couple students that unfortunately met untimely death. But amazing. And here's a good note. A gentleman that worked at Meridian Elementary and rose to the position of head custodian or whatever he's doing. The Kent Laboratory experience of the university sampler action for professors with teachers in that program to kind of go over some of the things to help them in some of that. But one of the things that I thought was pretty cool about it, because a lot of kids don't actually get the opportunity to be in a classroom at a college until they go there, you know. Time at Kent Laboratory, and that also that they can go up to UWT and they can go in and observe all day long. So that's a wonderful program that we're starting there. We're setting up a really good thing. This is in the superintendent's report, that we're restoring and reclaiming and reviving 25 new paraeducators. We certainly need to do more, and we need to do more, encourage them that. We did take a big step forward and signed a good contract that gave them competitive wages. Camp high school students from across the board, October 21st, where we trained them to be mentors with our fifth graders, and that's how we develop mentors and tutors and teachers and leaders. So I was glad we made the investment into the Kent Ridge Plays. They are absolutely amazing. So they're doing Hunchback from that one tonight. That one, and I'm excited to see that. And Kent Lake and some of these schools in Kentwood I've been to, they're not too shabby. They're pretty darn good. And that's cool. And of course, really wonderful that Kent's, one of the things I thought was interesting in the survey that we put out, we do kind of like a wellness survey or kind of support survey to see where our kids are at, to see what, you know, kind of feed into the multi-tiered support. Who's your biggest supporter? And the top three categories, and there was coaches, teachers, siblings, all kind of things, but the top three categories. So what we do outside of the homes is extremely important too. And we ask our kids if they felt in our high school, they believed that an adult at the school believed in them, if they had one. We had 71% of our kids answer that survey that said to that. The bus driver that did a wonderful job when the bus caught on fire in the Cedar Valley, you know, it didn't catch, or one student had a small degree burn, but they got that taken care of right away. And the helper there, the driver's Jamie Rito, and then a helper, I don't know how the data processors are important. We have 2 runners in cross country from Kentwood and 2 from Kent Ridge who advanced to state. And so lots of things going.
Samada, you were able to do almost everything I was talking about, so I think we're on the same wavelength for a lot of these. I did want to celebrate our girls' state soccer, Kent Ridge, Kent Lake, and a couple swimmers going to state. But we are very proud of, we have many different sports. we're just right here trying to write notes of which school was this, which school was this. And I think there's just a lot of really fun things going on. And you catch your, tears kind of welling up, right? Like these are devastating numbers we're looking at. And what it does help is think about, like, our kids are still having a really good time and bringing your true self, because we are all better people for having you in our district. I'm also excited. I believe there is a play, and I'm thinking it's Kentwood, the play where something goes wrong. I'm looking forward to going to that one too. And there's just so much, it's hard to keep up with everything. So it's not a bad problem to have. So that concludes mine tonight, and I think I might have even hit my 3 minutes or less.
I went to the budget exit conference with some folks from our district. It was on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. And there's some findings that the state auditors found that I'm assuming will be talked about at some upcoming board meeting that I think need to be addressed. And the report's online and somewhere, I don't know where I saw it, state auditor's office, something. But it's just something to kind of be aware of, and hopefully we could talk about that at some upcoming, what that is. Levies, I know that we've been kind of tiptoeing around talking about levies and whatnot so we can pass levies and bonds to support our schools, educators, and students. I tell every single one of my students, because I teach in a neighboring district, of course, that the election, because I think it's important to be part of the democratic process, regardless of what you do, because elections really do matter. Because I really don't want us to be cutting things, because I think the students in the room will get really mad if we're like, well, we're going to cut all athletics, and they'll be like, what? We're not. We haven't decided that. We haven't decided anything. Opinions about that. So I think it's really important that we participate in democratic processes, because opening night was tonight, but yet we're here, but that's fine. And I will find a day that's like, it's a long day, but I really want to go see that show. So I'm going to make it happen. Same with the Kentwood show. I really wanted to go see the play where something goes wrong. Of going to schools as board directors. I know we've been doing that, going to games, going to events. These decisions, I think it's important that we go talk to students, we go talk to staff, go to the schools, to go and do that, because apparently I don't get release time according to my contract, which is not. It's a lot of days. I'm presenting districts. I'm going to talk about the importance of board policies and making sure that, and I'm really just excited to do this again. It's be kind of like my final horizon. I don't think it's going to be. So I'm kind of disappointed that I think that's going to go beyond. Because like as I was looking at my calendar, I was like, wow, today is my last. I was thinking about that. I don't have a big old speech or anything planned, but I'm planning in place, or a new person will come in my position. So, doesn't pay well. So, but as I think about it and everything, for putting up with me as I do all this, but I'm very glad for, and I'm going to call this meeting, or I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.